"I'm sorry, Shay," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Shut up, Van," Cheyenne said through a jagged contraction. "The baby doesn't care about the paint. Just stay here." Thomas Hart Montgomery was born at 6:14 a.m. He was tiny 5 pounds and 4 ounces of red-faced defiance, but his lungs were strong enough to be heard in the hallway. Reba stood by the nursery window, watching as the nurse swaddled the smallest member of the Hart clan. Brock stood beside her, still wearing his woodshop apron, looking unusually sober. "He has your chin, Reba," he said softly, "the one that looks like it's ready to argue with a brick wall." "God help him," Reba replied, but she reached out and squeezed Brock's hand. For a moment, the bickering ended. In the sterile light of the hospital, they were just two people watching the world begin again. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Belonging. With the baby came a new, grounding reality. The beige exile ended not with a whimper, but with a moving truck heading back toward the heart of the city. Van and Cheyenne moved into a fixer-upper on Maple Street, a house Brock had purchased with the surprising profits from his birdhouse empire just to keep them close. It wasn't a palace. The porch had a lean, the floors groaned like a tired old man, and the wallpaper in the nursery was a terrifying 1970s floral print. But it was theirs. The garage at Reba's was empty now. The desks had been moved to the new collaborative warehouse near the ship channel. Kira had left for college, her car packed with college survival quiches and a stack of textbooks that cost more than a small car. Reba sat on her porch swing, the house behind her feeling too big, too quiet. The silence she had craved for 20 years now felt like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. "Hey, Mrs. H." Van's voice boomed from across the street. He was standing on his new lawn, holding Thomas like a football. "The bidet in the master bath works. I think I'm officially a success again." Reba laughed, the sound carrying over the hedges. Across the street, the lights were on at the house on Maple. She could see Cheyenne through the window, folding laundry. She could see Brock in the driveway, showing Barbara Jean a new birdhouse design. She wasn't alone. The architecture of her life had changed, shifting from the rigid walls of a suburban cage to a sprawling, messy, beautiful network of belonging. The licensing board had finally dismissed Steve Norris's complaints, thanks to some historical disclosures Ann Peterson had provided about Steve's own shady dealings in the 80s. The Titan had fallen, his empire shrinking as people realized that Heart and Soul wasn't just a name, it was a promise. Chapter 8. The Echoes of Breakfast. The first official morning of Reba's empty nest began with a terrifying amount of silence. She woke up at 6:30 a.m., her body still programmed to anticipate the chaos of a school morning or the frantic energy of Van looking for his lucky tie. She walked down the stairs, her slippers muffled by the rug. She waited for the sound of Elizabeth's heavy footsteps, or the booming, joyful noise of Van asking where the cereal was. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock in the hall. The kitchen was gleaming, and white a monument to a peace she had claimed to want for 20 years. Now that it was here, it felt like an uninvited guest. The silence was heavy, filling the space where laughter and arguments used to live. "Well, Reba," she whispered to the toaster as she lowered a single slice of bread, "it's just you and the appliances today. Try not to pick a fight with the dishwasher." She took her coffee to the window. Across the street, the lights were already on at the house on Maple. Through the front window, she could see Van's silhouette. He was pacing, likely wrestling with a diaper or a stubborn onesie. The urge to walk over there with a pot of coffee and a checklist was almost overwhelming. Her hands physically ached to hold the baby, to fix the sink, to be the center of the orbit again. But she stayed in her seat. A mother knows when to fight for her place, but a survivor knows when to retreat so others can learn to stand. She sipped her coffee, watching her family live their lives without her, and felt the first true pang of being an observer in her own world. Chapter 9. The Maple Street Blues. At the house on Maple, the architecture of belonging was currently consisting of several half-unpacked boxes, a faint smell of old paint, and a plumbing system that seemed to be playing a percussion solo. Van was currently under the kitchen sink, his hands covered in a black grime that didn't look like it belonged in a residential building. "Che, hand me the wrench, the big one," No, the one that looks like it belongs to a giant. Cheyenne walked in, Thomas balanced on one hip and a look of profound skepticism on her face. Van, maybe we should call a plumber. Or my mom. Especially my mom. She once fixed a toilet with a bobby pin and sheer willpower. No! Van's voice emerged, muffled from the cabinet. I am the man of this house. Steve Norris didn't give me a bidet so I could call another man to fix a U-joint. I've got this. I am a homeowner. I am a father. I am leaking. A sudden, sharp spray of water and a loud awe. Van emerged a moment later, dripping wet, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked at his wife, his son, and the house that was supposed to be his great victory. For a second, the bravado failed him. I miss the garage, he admitted softly, his voice barely audible over the sound of the dripping pipe. Cheyenne sat on a packing crate and pulled him down next to her. She didn't mock him. She didn't call Reba. We all do, honey. But look at this place. It's messy, it's broken, and it's currently a swamp. But it's ours. We're not the guests anymore, Van. We're the hosts. And every host needs a story about the time they flooded the kitchen. Van leaned his head on her shoulder, the water from his shirt soaking into her sweater. He felt the weight of the house, the mortgage, and the tiny heartbeat of his son. It was terrifying. But as he looked at Cheyenne, he realized he wasn't alone in the wreckage. Chapter 10. The Birdhouse Boutique. Across the street, Brock's birdhouse empire had officially hit a snag named Victoria Sterling. Victoria was the president of the Houston Horticultural Society, a woman who treated gardens like boardrooms and looked at Brock's workshop through designer glasses that probably cost more than his truck. Mr. Hart, she said, tapping a gloved finger against a cedar shingle. These structures, they are charming, in a rustic, almost primitive way, but they lack a certain je ne sais quoi. They are a bit too homegrown. Brock bristled. He had spent 6 hours on the copper flashing of that particular unit. Homegrown? Ma'am, this is a 1/24th scale replica of the San Antonio missions. The drainage is state-of-the-art. It has a removable floor for cleaning. Barbara Jean stepped in, her eyes gleaming with the light of 1,000 infomercials. She knew exactly how to handle women like Victoria. What Victoria means, Brock, is that we haven't told the story yet. She turned to Victoria with a dazzling smile. These aren't just birdhouses, Victoria. They are avian heritage sanctuaries. They are for the socialite cardinal who values history over humidity. They are a statement piece for the yard that has everything. Victoria paused, her expression softening. Heritage sanctuaries? That has a ring to it. It sounds philanthropic. Reba, watching from her porch swing, couldn't help but admire the audacity. Barbara Jean was using Van and Cheyenne's fixer-upper as a charitable cause to sell birdhouses to socialites. It was brilliant, it was insane, and it was perfectly hot. Chapter 11. The Weight of the Crown. The success of the Heart and Soul Collaborative brought a new kind of fatigue. They were no longer the scrappy underdogs fighting for a single listing. They were a target. Reba found herself spending more time with lawyers, zoning inspectors, and tax consultants than she did with actual clients. Mrs. H., the property taxes on the warehouse just tripled, Van said one afternoon, holding a paper that looked like it had been signed by the devil himself. Apparently, revitalizing the neighborhood means paying for everyone else's new sidewalks. They saw the glitter. Van. Reba sighed, rubbing her temples. Success in Houston is like a neon sign. It attracts the buyers, but it also attracts the tax collectors. We need a big win, not just another house in River Oaks. We need something that puts us on the map permanently. Something that proves we aren't just a boutique hobby. But that weekend, a stranger arrived at the loading dock. Gabriel Vance wasn't there to buy a house. He was there because he had a problem that only a woman with gentle hands and the heart of a fighter could solve. I've heard you specialize in lost causes, Mrs. Hart, he said, handing her a folder. Inside was a photograph of the Blackwood estate. It was a masterpiece of Gothic decay, a Victorian mansion swallowed by ivy and rumors of hauntings. It was the kind of property realtors avoided like the plague. It's scheduled for demolition in January, Gabriel said, unless we can prove its historical significance, or find a buyer who isn't afraid of ghosts. Reba looked at the crumbling towers and the dark windows. It looked like her life felt grand, broken, and waiting for someone to notice the structure beneath the ruin. Van, she called out, pack the industrial cleaner. We're going to the dark side. Chapter 12. Shadows of Blackwood. The Blackwood estate was not just a house, it was a psychological battlefield. Located on the edge of the historic district, it stood as a defiant middle finger to the glass and steel modernism of the surrounding skyscrapers. Its turrets reached up like skeletal fingers, and the gargoyles on the roof seemed to track Reba's every movement as she stepped through the rusted iron gates. It smells like old library books and regret, Van whispered, his voice hushed by the sheer scale of the foyer. A massive chandelier hung precariously from a ceiling that featured a faded mural of a celestial map.